Daniel Rhodes never thought his life would change because of an email. It came late at night while he was sitting in his small apartment in New York, drinking instant coffee and reading alien language samples on his tablet. The message was short, official, and unbelievable. You have been selected as Earth's linguistic representative to attend the royal wedding of the Arkel Empire. Please report to the United Nations spaceport within 48 hours. Daniel blinked twice, thinking it was a prank, but a follow-up message from the UN confirmed it. They wanted him on the next diplomatic shuttle. His heart raced. The Arkel were one of the most advanced alien civilizations humanity had met, and their royal wedding was said to be the biggest event in the galaxy. Daniel had studied alien languages for years, but he never imagined he would actually go to another planet. 2 days later, Daniel stood at the spaceport, clutching a small bag and trying not to look nervous. The shuttle that would take him to the Arkel world floated silently on the landing pad, its sleek silver hull reflecting the morning light. A group of diplomats and scientists waited with him. When the boarding began, Daniel stepped inside the shuttle and was immediately greeted by soft glowing lights and a smooth hum that seemed to come from the floor itself. There were no visible engines, no loud noises. Everything felt advanced and calm. He took a seat and felt the ship lift off with no sense of motion, as if the Earth had simply fallen away beneath him. The journey took 3 days, and during that time, Daniel practiced the Arkel language, which was a mix of melodic tones and hand gestures. He was nervous but also excited. This was history. When the shuttle finally arrived at the Arkel homeworld, Daniel's jaw dropped. The planet was a glowing jewel in space, its atmosphere shimmering with strange colors. As the ship descended, Daniel saw cities made of giant crystal spires that reached high into the sky, connected by floating bridges. Strange winged creatures flew between the towers, and the streets below shimmered with rivers of light. "Welcome to Kelthar," said the Arkel guide, a tall being with silver-blue skin and a calm, musical voice. "The royal wedding will begin at sunset." Daniel was taken to a guest chamber inside the royal palace, which looked like something from a dream. Glowing walls, floating chairs, and windows that opened to a view of the entire city. He barely had time to change into the ceremonial robe provided for him before being guided to the Great Hall. The royal wedding was unlike anything Daniel had ever seen. Hundreds of alien species filled the hall, each more strange and fascinating than the last. Some were covered in fur, some had glowing eyes, and some seemed to be made entirely of light. Music filled the air, deep and rich, vibrating through the floor like thunder. The bride and groom, both Arkel nobles, stood beneath a floating ring of light as priests sang in harmony. Daniel could barely follow the words, but he knew this was a sacred moment. Halfway through the ceremony, a sudden problem occurred. One of the translators malfunctioned, and the message being broadcast to the alien guests came out wrong. A phrase that should have been a blessing turned into an insult in 3 alien languages. The crowd began to murmur in confusion. Daniel's heart pounded. If this was not fixed quickly, it could offend half the galaxy's leaders. Without thinking, he stepped forward, raised his hands, and corrected the phrase in perfect Arkel speech, adding the human gesture for apology. A sign he had read was considered respectful. The hall fell silent for a moment. Then, to Daniel's shock, the king himself stood and clapped his hands, a sound like ringing bells. "The human speaks well," the king declared. "He has honored our words." The guests cheered, and the music resumed, even louder than before. Daniel stepped back, his face red, but he could feel dozens of alien eyes watching him with new respect. For the rest of the ceremony, Daniel stayed quiet, but something had changed. Aliens who had ignored him before now nodded politely as he passed. A few even tried to speak to him. By the end of the night, Daniel felt like he had done something important, something that made humanity look good in front of the entire galaxy. He had no idea that this small act of bravery was only the beginning. Far above the hall, in the royal balcony, Princess Kalara, daughter of the king, watched the human guest with great interest. She had never seen a creature like him, so nervous, so clumsy, and yet so quick to act. "This one," she said quietly to her maid. "Keep an eye on him. I think he will be interesting." Daniel had no way of knowing that this single moment, speaking up at the right time, had already placed him on a path that would change not just his life, but the future of Earth itself. The next morning, Daniel woke up in his guest chamber feeling both proud and nervous. Proud, because he had somehow saved a galactic wedding from turning into an interstellar disaster. Nervous, because he had no idea what was supposed to happen next. An attendant arrived to escort him to the royal breakfast hall. Daniel tried to walk confidently, but he felt out of place among the tall, graceful Arkel servants. He was the only human in sight, and he could feel every pair of alien eyes on him. The hall was massive, with tables shaped like shining crescents. Plates floated gently above the table surface, each holding food that glowed faintly in different colors. Daniel sat where the attendants directed him, at a table near the front. He didn't realize until a moment later that he was seated directly across from Princess Kalyra. She was striking, tall, with shimmering silver-blue skin, long white hair, and golden eyes that seemed to look straight through him. She wore a robe made of crystal-like fabric that sparkled with every movement. "You are the human who saved the wedding," she said in perfect standard galactic. Her voice was calm but curious. Daniel nearly choked on the drink he had just tried. Yes," he said quickly. I just helped with the translation error. I'm glad I could be useful." Kalyra smiled slightly. "You were brave." Many guests stayed silent, afraid of offending someone. "But you spoke." Daniel felt his ears turn red. "I didn't really think, I just did what seemed right." They began talking as they ate. Kalyra asked endless questions about Earth, its cities, its music, even what humans considered beautiful. Daniel did his best to answer using simple words. He told her about sunsets, mountains, and the smell of rain after a storm. She listened carefully, her golden eyes thoughtful. Then Kalyra asked about human wedding traditions. "In your culture," she said, tilting her head, "how do you show that you wish to join with another for life?" Daniel laughed nervously. "Well, usually a man kneels, gives a ring, and asks if the person will marry him." "Show me," Kalyra said with interest. Daniel froze. You mean act it out?" "Yes," she said, smiling faintly. "I wish to see how humans do this." Daniel stood awkwardly and, half-joking, went down on one knee. He didn't have a ring, so he picked up a small round fruit from the table and held it up. "Like this," he said. "You hold something and say, 'Will you marry me?'" The hall went silent, every eye turned to them. Even the king and queen sitting at the far end of the hall looked up. Kalyra's golden eyes widened, then softened. Slowly, with great dignity, she stood and placed her hand on Daniel's head. "Yes," she said clearly. The hall erupted in a chorus of musical sounds. The Arkel guests clapped their hands, a sound like ringing bells, and began to sing what sounded like a wedding blessing. Daniel's face went pale. "Wait," he said, standing quickly. No, that wasn't, but it was too late." Servants rushed forward, bowing to him. A herald announced in a booming voice, "The human has offered a bond and the princess has accepted. A new union is formed." Daniel felt his legs go weak. "This is a misunderstanding," he tried to say, but no one seemed to hear him. Or maybe they just didn't care. Kalyra, on the other hand, looked calm, even pleased. She turned to him and said softly, "Do not be afraid, Daniel of Earth, you have honored me." "I accept," Daniel blinked at her. "But I wasn't actually, I was just showing." She smiled slightly. "Intent is not important." The gesture was made. The bond is sealed. Before Daniel could respond, the king himself stood, smiling broadly. "This is a day of celebration," the king declared. "Not only have we joined two noble houses, but now we join two worlds." The guests cheered louder. Music began to play. Someone placed a ceremonial sash over Daniel's shoulders, marking him as a royal betrothed. Daniel felt dizzy. He was just a linguist, a normal man from Earth. He had come to watch a wedding, not become part of one. When the feast ended, Kalyra walked beside him. "You look troubled," she said quietly. Daniel stared at her. "Troubled? I think I just accidentally proposed to an alien princess." Kalyra's smile widened a little. "Yes, and you did it well," Daniel groaned. "This has to be a mistake. If I refuse, will that offend your family?" Kalyra's expression grew serious. "If you reject the bond after the public acceptance, it will not just offend my family. It may be seen as a grave insult to the entire Arkel Empire." Daniel's stomach sank. This was worse than he thought. He looked up at the glowing palace towers and took a deep breath. He couldn't just walk away, not without risking a diplomatic disaster that might harm Earth's future relations with the Arkel. For the first time, Daniel realized that his life was no longer just his own, and tomorrow, he would have to stand in front of the entire empire for a second ceremony, one that would make him officially married to an alien princess. Daniel stood in front of a mirror, staring at the ceremonial armor they had dressed him in. The golden breastplate glowed softly, shaped perfectly to fit his body. A long dark blue cloak rested on his shoulders, heavy but majestic. "This can't be real," he whispered to himself. "I'm just a linguist. I shouldn't be wearing royal armor." Before he could think any longer, an attendant stepped into the room. "Prince Consort Daniel," the attendant said formally. "It is time." Daniel swallowed hard. Prince Consort. The title felt too big for him. He was led into the great hall, where hundreds of aliens waited. The walls glowed with bright colors and music filled the air. At the far end of the hall, King Thalrin and Queen Sarai stood proudly with Princess Kalira at their side. The ceremony was short but grand. A priest placed a shining band of crystal around Daniel's wrist, the Arkel symbol of marriage. When Kalira touched her own crystal band to his, a soft light connected them for a moment and the crowd cheered. Just like that, it was official. Daniel Rhodes of Earth was now married to the princess of the Arkel Empire. The cheering was loud, but Daniel felt strangely calm. He glanced at Kalira. She was standing straight and proud, but when their eyes met, she gave him a small nod, almost reassuring. Somehow that gave him strength. After the ceremony came the banquet. Daniel sat beside Kalira at the royal table while servants brought glowing dishes and colorful drinks. Aliens from across the galaxy came to greet him. Some were polite, offering blessings and gifts. Others were clearly skeptical, their voices cool and distant. Daniel tried to smile and thank everyone, but inside, he felt the weight of every stare. He knew many of these nobles did not want a human in their royal family. Later that evening, Kalira led him to a quiet balcony overlooking the Crystal City. "You did well today," she said softly. Daniel gave a tired laugh. "I just stood there and tried not to faint." "That is enough for now," Kalira said. "But you must be ready. There are those in the council who see you as a threat." Daniel frowned. "A threat? I'm just one man. I don't even know how your government works." Kalira turned her golden eyes toward him. "That does not matter. You are now my husband. To them, that gives you power. Some will test you to see if you are worthy." As if on cue, an armored guard arrived and bowed. "Your Highness," he said to Kalira, "the council requests the presence of the new prince consort for the trial of worth." Daniel's stomach dropped. "Trial of worth? That doesn't sound friendly." Kalira placed a hand on his arm. "It is tradition. Every new member of the royal house must face it. But do not fear. I will guide you." The trial was held in a different hall, smaller but filled with the most important nobles in the empire. Daniel stood in the center while the council members watched from high seats. The first challenge was a test of agility. A gravity maze appeared, a floating path of platforms that shifted in mid-air. Daniel's task was to cross it without falling. He stared at the floating path and took a deep breath. "Okay, Daniel," he muttered. "You passed gym class. You can do this." He stepped onto the first platform, which tilted under his weight. The crowd murmured. Daniel wobbled but stayed on his feet. Slowly, carefully he made his way across, jumping from platform to platform. At one point he slipped, but he caught himself with both hands and pulled back up. When he reached the other side, the crowd actually clapped. The second challenge was a test of wisdom. A council member asked him a riddle in the Arkel language. Daniel's heart pounded as he translated the words in his head. "What has no mouth but speaks, no legs but travels, no home but can be found everywhere?" the counselor asked. Daniel thought for a moment, then smiled. "An echo," he said confidently. The council murmured approval. The final challenge was the most difficult: negotiation. Daniel had to mediate between two alien ambassadors who were arguing about trade routes. At first, Daniel struggled to follow their rapid words, but he remembered his training. Instead of arguing, he asked questions and let them explain their positions. Slowly, he found a solution that gave both sides a small victory. When the council announced that he had passed the trial of worth, Daniel felt a wave of relief. "You see," Kalira said later as they walked back to the palace. "You are stronger than you believe." Daniel smiled tiredly. "I guess I am. But what happens now?" Kalira's expression grew serious. Now you must learn to survive in the court, and soon you will face something far more dangerous than a trial. Daniel didn't like the sound of that. From the shadows of the palace, unseen by Daniel or Kalira, a group of cloaked figures watched them go. "The human has passed the trial," one of them whispered. "This will complicate our plan. We must act soon, before he gains more power." Days passed, and Daniel began to adjust to life in the royal palace. He learned to walk through the shining halls without getting lost, to speak politely to the servants, and to follow the strange customs of the Arkel court. But no matter what he did, he could feel the council watching him, waiting for him to fail. Every morning, Kalira took him to the council chamber to observe debates. "If you are to stay here," she told him, "you must understand how our world works." Daniel listened carefully as the council argued about trade, alliances, and security. He noticed that certain council members always spoke against the king's decisions, trying to make him look weak. One of them, Lord Vekran, stared at Daniel every time he entered the room. One afternoon, the council presented Daniel with a new challenge, a diplomatic test. Two alien races, the Creel and the Solari, had been fighting over the right to mine a moon, rich with valuable crystals. They had refused to speak to each other for months. "Let the human solve this," Lord Vekran said with a thin smile. "If he fails, perhaps we will see that his presence here is a mistake." The room went silent. Daniel felt his stomach tighten. This was exactly what Kalira had warned him about, a test meant to humiliate him. Kalira leaned close and whispered, "Do not let them see your fear." Daniel nodded slowly and stood. "I will try," he said. The Creel ambassador was a tall, insect-like being with a sharp, clicking voice. The Solari ambassador looked like a being made of liquid silver, its body shifting as it spoke. Daniel listened as they both explained their claims. The Creel said their ancestors had lived on the moon for generations. The Solari argued that they had legal rights to mine it under an old treaty. Instead of taking sides, Daniel asked questions: why the moon was important, what each side needed most, and what they feared losing. The ambassadors argued, but slowly they began to answer. After nearly an hour, Daniel had an idea. "What if you share the moon?" he suggested. "The Creel can keep their ancestral sites safe, and the Solari can mine in the outer regions. You could even work together, Creel knowledge and Solari technology." The two ambassadors looked at each other. There was a long silence. Then the Solari gave a low ripple, their version of a nod, and the Creel clicked their mandibles in agreement. The council chamber erupted in murmurs. The king smiled proudly. "Well done, Prince Consort," he said. Lord Vekran did not smile. His eyes narrowed, and Daniel knew he had just made another enemy. That night, as Daniel and Kalira walked through the palace gardens, he felt uneasy. "I think someone wants me gone," he said. Kalira nodded. "You are correct. Vekran and his allies fear that you will influence my father. They want to remove you before you gain more support." Daniel frowned. "Remove me? You mean—" "Yes," Kalira said softly. "They may try to disgrace you, or worse." Before Daniel could reply, a shadow moved in the garden. A strange humming filled the air, and a small drone shot out from behind a tree. Kalira reacted instantly, grabbing Daniel's arm and pulling him down as the drone fired a bolt of energy over their heads. Guards rushed in and destroyed the drone. But the message was clear. Someone had tried to harm them. Back inside the palace, the king was furious. "This is an attack on the royal house," he said. "We will find who is responsible." But Daniel wasn't convinced that waiting for the investigation was enough. "If they're willing to attack us here," he said, "then they're planning something bigger." Kalira agreed. "We must uncover the plot before the next royal feast. The entire court will be there. It would be the perfect time for them to strike." For the next 2 days, Daniel worked with Kalira and a small group of trusted guards. They searched for clues, followed secret tunnels in the palace, and listened for rumors. Daniel's human perspective helped him see things the others missed. Small inconsistencies, strange timing, suspicious movements by servants. Finally, on the night before the feast, they discovered the truth. In a hidden chamber beneath the palace, they found weapons and disguises prepared by Lord Vekran's faction. A plan was carved into a crystal tablet. During the feast, the conspirators would assassinate the king and blame Daniel, claiming the human prince had betrayed the empire. Daniel's heart pounded as he stared at the evidence. If we don't stop this tomorrow, I'll be executed, and Earth will lose everything. Kalira placed a hand on his shoulder. Then we will stop it, together. Daniel nodded. For the first time since arriving on this world, he felt ready. Tomorrow he would not just be a guest or a linguist or even a nervous prince. He would have to be a hero. The grand hall of the Arkel Palace was filled with hundreds of guests from across the galaxy. Music floated through the air, and colorful light shimmered from the crystal walls. Daniel Rhodes stood beside Princess Kalira, his hands clenched nervously. Tonight was the royal feast, and somewhere among the guests were the conspirators who planned to assassinate the king and blame him. Remember, Kalira whispered, we know the plan. Stay calm and follow me, Daniel nodded. He could feel his heart pounding, but he forced himself to take a deep breath. The feast began as usual. Dishes floated across the tables, glowing softly, and dignitaries gave speeches praising the king and queen. Daniel tried to smile and nod politely, all while keeping a careful watch over the crowd. He noticed Lord Vekran sitting at a table near the back, his eyes constantly scanning the hall. Daniel could sense the tension in the air. Vekran and his allies were waiting for the right moment. As the king rose to make a toast, Daniel subtly signaled to Kalira. She understood instantly. With a small gesture, she pointed toward the ceiling, where a hidden balcony overlooked the hall. Two of the palace guards slipped quietly into position, unseen by the conspirators. Suddenly, Vekran made his move. A strange humming filled the hall, and small energy devices hovered near the ceiling, aimed directly at the king. Guests gasped as the devices activated, glowing red. Now, Daniel shouted. Kalira pressed a button hidden in her sleeve. The guards on the balcony released nets that captured the devices before they could reach the king. Chaos erupted as alarms blared. Vekran and his faction tried to flee, but the palace guards moved quickly, blocking all exits. Daniel stepped forward, his voice strong. The conspirators are here. Arrest them! The hall froze as everyone turned to look. The king's eyes widened, then he nodded. Guards seized Vekran and the others, who struggled and protested, but it was too late. Their plan had failed. Daniel felt a rush of relief. He had saved not only the king, but also the stability of the entire empire. Kalira stepped beside him, smiling. You were amazing, she said softly. The empire owes you more than it can say. Daniel shook his head. I just did what had to be done. You guided me every step. The king approached them, his expression proud and warm. Daniel Rhodes of Earth, he said. You have proven yourself worthy not just of our family, but of the Arkel Empire itself. Today you have saved our world and strengthened the bond between our species. The hall erupted in applause. Daniel felt embarrassed but proud. He had never imagined that a simple human could achieve such a thing among aliens. Later, as the feast continued, the king announced a new celebration. Tonight we honor bravery and unity, he said, and we celebrate the marriage that has brought two worlds together. Daniel looked at Kalira. Her golden eyes sparkled with amusement and pride. You have done well, my prince, she said. Daniel smiled nervously. I'm still getting used to the idea that I'm actually a prince, Kalira laughed softly. It suits you. After the banquet, Daniel and Kalira walked to the palace balcony, overlooking the city glowing under the twin moons. The air was cool and the wind carried the scent of alien flowers. Daniel, Kalira said, turning to him. Do you want to stay? Daniel hesitated. This world was strange, dangerous, and full of rules he didn't understand. But then he looked at Kalira and thought of the adventures they had faced together. The trials, the challenges, the conspiracies they had overcome. Yes, he said finally. I want to stay. I want to help, and I want to be with you. Kalira smiled and took his hand. Then it is decided. The next morning, the royal court officially recognized Daniel as the prince consort of the Arkel Empire. He was given his own council chamber, advisors, and responsibilities. But more importantly, he was no longer just a human from Earth. He was a bridge between two worlds, a symbol of courage, intelligence, and compassion. Word of Daniel's bravery spread quickly. Across the galaxy, humans were admired in ways they had never been before. Daniel's actions proved that even a simple human could make a difference in a universe full of powerful aliens. Days turned into weeks, and Daniel continued to learn about the Arkel culture, participate in diplomacy, and strengthen ties between Earth and the Empire. Kalira was always by his side, guiding him and challenging him to be better. One evening, Daniel stood in the palace gardens looking up at the stars. The city of Kelthar glittered below, and he felt a deep sense of belonging. He had come as a guest to a wedding and, by accident, become a prince. He had faced challenges that no human had ever faced before. And he had survived not just through luck, but through courage, intelligence, and the support of those who believed in him. Daniel Rhodes had arrived on the Arkell world as an ordinary human. But now he was a hero, a prince, and the husband of a princess. And for the first time he realized that sometimes life's biggest accidents could become its greatest adventures. The stars above seemed to shine a little brighter that night, as if celebrating the human who had earned his place among them.